Hello, my friend, Pastor Curt here, and I got a question for you. Have you ever been really thirsty? One time I went on a mountain bike ride with a bunch of my buddies, and we were way up in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and this guy who knew the area said, I'm going to drop you off on this one log road, and it's a 15-mile ride. That's not that bad of a ride. It's a 15-mile ride down to town. So we said 15 miles, let's get one bottle of water each. We threw a bottle of water in our backpack. We got up there. We didn't expect it to be so hot. It was blazing hot. And we went 15 miles and there was no town. And then we went another 15 miles, 30 miles, and there was no town. He dropped us off in the wrong place. We were 35 miles that day to town. Well, I tell you what, the water ran out like mile 2. And we were so thirsty. We come limping into town, dragging ourselves into town. And the first place that was open, man, we sat down. We must have drank 17 gallons of water before even anyone said a word. And none of us used the bathroom for 3 days. That's how dehydrated we were. Well, what's the point of that story? In the Bible, the people of Israel in the desert with their kids and their livestock were even more thirsty than that. In fact, 2 different times in this story, we have this poignant moment where God brings miraculous water to them in a moment of great thirst. Here's this one in Numbers 20, 2-5. Now, there was no water for the community, and the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. They quarreled with Moses and said, if only we had died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord. Why did you bring the Lord's community into this wilderness, that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this terrible place? It has no grain or figs, grapevines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink. They're miserable. In fact, they're on the verge of violence. And it's a perfect example of a dynamic that goes on in our life, and it's going on in our culture right now. 3 big factors are revealed in this moment of great thirst. One is familiar failure. They're at a place called Kadesh, a place where their parents were judged. They said, we'd rather be dead like our parents than be here. This is a place of familiar failure. What is familiar failure? It's when fatigue makes us make the same mistakes over and over again. The second factor here is fatalism. When you get into that pattern of familiar failure, you start believing in fatalism. What's fatalism? It's discouragement that leads us to believing that nothing can ever change. In a lot of issues in our country right now, people are so fatalistic. This will never change. We'll never correct this injustice. We'll never move forward. What happens when you have familiar failure, we keep making the same mistakes, and fatalism? It leads to the last one, fighting. In discouragement, in frustration, we lash out at others. We don't compromise. We don't get solution-oriented. We get in fight mode. How do you get out of familiar failure, fatalism, and fighting? Well, it's just one simple thought. God gives them water. Even in all their sin. Even in their familiar failure they do over and over again. Even in their fatalism, lack of faith, it'll never change. It was your fault. In their grumbling and opposition and fighting, God is still a God of grace. Once they get their eyes on that water, and more importantly, drink deeply of it, they begin to change. And that's what you and I need. We need to drink deeply of the love of God and the forgiveness of God and the presence of God. We need to drink deeply of the grace of God. When we understand the refreshing grace of God that he gives to us in our familiar failure and in our fatalism and even in our fighting, he gives us that grace. Well, then we become agents of grace. Today, take a moment and say, God, fill me up with the water of your Holy Spirit. Fill me up with the refreshing of your grace. And let me go out into a failing world where it's fatalistic, and instead of fighting, be an agent of grace.